tennis world and the Intercollegiate Tennis Association. More in the loss of men's coaching legend Steve Wilkinson, who passed away January 21st at the age of 73. ITA Men's Collegiate Tennis Hall of Famer Wilkinson took over the head coach reins of Gustavus Adolphus College men's tennis program in 1971, where he contributed 4 decades, molding the lives of hundreds of players into respected competitors and individuals. Coach Wilkinson amassed a total of 929 wins, which currently stands as the most wins of any head coach in the history of men's college tennis. The 5-time National NCAA D3 Coach of the Year's teams won the NCAA Division III Team Championship in 1980 and 82. Wilkinson coached 87 individual ITA All-American honors, securing 10 national titles in singles and doubles. Among his many notable players include Eric Bukarek, ATP career high, number 17 in the world doubles, and current president of the ATP Player Council. Steve and his wife Barbara founded Tennis in Life camps conducted at Gustavus Adolphus, helping tennis players of all ages and abilities develop and improve tennis skills and enrich their approach to life. He was also inducted into numerous halls of fame, including the United States Professional Tennis Association, the International Tennis Hall of Fame's Tennis Education Merit Award, and the Lifetime Achievement Award from the University of Iowa. As a collegian, Steve was a standout member of the University of Iowa's men's tennis team. He continued to play competitively after college, earning the number 1 ranking in the United States in the 45, 50, 55, and 60 and over divisions, and represented the United States in world competition. His memoir, Let Love Serve, was recently published. The book is a celebration of tennis and life. Steve Wilkinson was a pillar of a man, on and off the court. Join us as we further get to know Steve and hear a tribute from his longtime colleague, ITA Executive Director David Benjamin.
Well, everyone, I'm doing great. For the last 2 years, I've been at almost every Tennis in Life camp teaching day, helping kids, helping adults. Almost every day for the last 2 years, been helping Tommy with the tennis. Just this last Christmas, ran a mini tennis camp for the family in Hawaii. We had a wonderful time. In just a little bit, Barb and I are going to Europe to visit her relatives. So I'm doing great. That doesn't mean, however, that the cancer situation is licked. It was 4.5 years ago that I had my kidney removed and was told that I had about 9 months to live. As it's turned out, I've exceeded expectations. It's been 4.5 years. I'd say for the last 1.5 years, the cancer has not been advancing, but it has had its impact. A good share of my left hip has been eaten away by the cancer, so now I limit myself to riding the bike and doing my daily exercises and yoga. All of that's good, and I continue to move ahead. I have many reasons for which to be grateful. I'm making great progress on the book that I'm writing, which is entitled Love, Love. It's a memoir, and I think a lot of you people will be interested in reading it when I get around to getting it finished. But right now, I'm just having a great time writing it. See you later.
David, the college tennis world sadly said farewell to a real leader this week when Steve Wilkinson lost his 7-year battle with cancer. What impact did Steve have on college tennis and in the game in general?
Steve was a very good friend, and as you said, it'd been a long battle, struggle, and in talking with Tommy Valentini, who's inherited Steve's position as coach, just the last month, Tommy talked about how each time Steve came back from a very arduous treatment, chemotherapy or radiation, he would be encouraging and cheering everyone else up. He just, as you know, published his book where he talks about his outlook on life, how decades ago he had been strongly influenced by someone who went through a young person, a battle with cancer, and how at that stage it had a huge influence on him, but he never really expected, of course, to be in a similar situation. It is terribly sad that we just lost Steve. We're just working on a special tribute to him.
How recently did you speak with Steve?
I just was in touch with Steve a month or two ago because we have a new award courtesy of Doug Conant and the Conant Leadership Foundation that is called the Meritorious Service Award, and Steve was one of 4 finalists. If he were to win the award, we were going to give it out at our convention, and he wasn't sure, this was early December, dependent on treatments and health, whether he could make the trip to Florida, but hoped he'd be able to if it turned out he received the award. And that was very typical of his both complimenting everyone else, his modesty, and also his willingness to try to participate even under such difficult circumstances.
David, when did you and Steve first meet? What was he like in those early years?
I first got to know Steve when I started coaching and became involved with the ITA back in 76, 77, 78. I was on the head advisory board. At that time, Arthur Ashe was chairman of the board, and Steve was also on that board. That was the first time we got to know each other. I asked Steve to be part of our board. He was by far one of the most outstanding and important coaches on the Division III level. And I felt it was really important for the ITA to include all the divisions, inclusive of every level of college tennis. And Steve was incredibly bright, very thoughtful, and in a very positive way, very aggressive. And we had a number of discussions where he really pushed me hard to say, you know, if you really want to have an association that's representative of all college tennis, you have to find ways to do more for schools in Division III. It can't revolve always around Georgia and UCLA and Texas and Division I schools. So he helped me both think more about it and then made constructive suggestions, the most specific one being that when we started the Intercollegiate Championships in Houston, it was just 32 men, Division I, and 16 men in doubles. Then we expanded it to have regional events, and there were 8 regions at that time. So the regional events, we invited all of the different schools in a region to participate. For example, in Princeton, where we hosted a regional event, Princeton would play in it, Penn State would play in it, but so would Bennington or Swarthmore, Division III schools, or Trenton State, Division II. But most of the time, because the level of Division I was stronger, the schools coming from a Division III school, even the good players, would lose in the first round. This was in the early 1980s, and Steve called me and we talked more, and he said, you know, I really think it's not enough to invite a Division III school to an event that's going to be dominated by Division I. We should look at ways to have regional events that would just be for each division so that the best players in Division III would have a chance to win a regional tournament. And then maybe we should think about having a national event for those that aren't Division I. For sure, we would have approached this more slowly, and it might have taken a lot longer to implement this if Steve hadn't been, in a nice way, pushing me. It's an extraordinary program that's evolved over many, many years, but Steve deserves a lot of credit for helping to launch the multifaceted, multi-layered level, and always a great champion of not just Division III, but all college tennis, and giving importance to the college coaches and college players that weren't playing Division I.
What were some of his missions?
His emphasis on sportsmanship and educational element of coaching and a code of and a vision of life that transcends just tennis and the sport of tennis. And as you know, Steve created life camps. In the book that the ITA published in 1989, I believe it was, even Steve wrote a chapter where he talked about sportsmanship. In the book, we also had contributors, Dick Gould, Glenn Bassett, and Alan Fox, and Carol Plunkett. The philosophy that Steve had then and had throughout his life and articulated in that chapter, and then, of course, in the book that he just recently published, was very important. So,
where does Steve Wilkinson rank in contributors to college tennis?
If I had to, and I would hate to try to do this, but make a list of 10 coaches who had the greatest influence over the last 40 years on college tennis, influence in the largest sense of the word, Steve would certainly be one of those.
Certainly agree with that. Hey, what kind of ideas was Steve throwing around the college leaders back in those days?
Steve also helped suggest we should have a convention. So, well, how do you do a convention, and what should we do at the convention? Well, Steve was one of the best players coaching college tennis. And so Steve and Larry Turville and a few others said, well, there has to be a tournament. And
absolutely, yes.
There has to be prize money in the tournament. So we were fortunate in that we were able to find a sponsor for a prize money tournament at our first convention, which was at Sanibel Harbor in Florida, outside of Fort Myers. And I think Steve got to the semis. And so he also deserves credit for helping get conventions started and having a coaches tournament, which was, for a number of years, was one of the highlights of our convention.
What was Steve like to work with on group projects? How high was that Wilkinson bar?
Steve, again, was in a very, very constructive, positive way, an agitator. He had a wonderful philosophy about life and lived it, and was a great role model. He lived what he taught. He wasn't always very patient with people that he felt weren't living up to his standard. And he made that clear at times. We had a great friendship, a great partnership. He really had an extremely high standard. And he expected people to be able to operate at that standard. He expected so much from himself. As an educator, he expected a tremendous amount from everyone he was working with. But I think that was to his credit. From my own experience, I think it was helpful to me. Without that gentle nudge from him, I might have not been quite as ready to move in a direction that was a very good direction to take.
You show a sincere interest in the person, and that you reflect your sincere desire that they come to Gustavus.
Steve, the tennis world is missing you. For all of us who have had the privilege of getting to know you, you have been inspirational. And again, thanks for all your unselfish contributions. We will keep alive our love of the game, Steve, in your honor.